Don't count walkers. You count trials. Are you doing that? In the count I am, but I don't think that those should be counted as quotas.
Okay.
I'm not learning.
We're going to fly through what we've already talked about, and we'll pick up at the end there. We will not go over. I'll make sure your blanks are filled in, but we're not going to relitigate the whole Jesus anointing. We spent a good deal of time on that already. So Jesus first has a question from the Pharisees about his authority. Where does his authority come from? Who was his rabbi? And he doesn't answer the question. He asks them a question that they can't answer. And then the second one was a question about taxes. And you remember this was the Pharisees and the Herodians, and even though they hated one another, they were both united in their hatred of Jesus. So that's what brought them together. And I think I told you, maybe I told the other class, this saying of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And that's the situation we have here. So they both were enemies of Jesus, and so that made the Pharisees friends. And that question was about taxes, and Jesus did answer that question, just not in the way they expected. They asked a yes or no question, and he didn't give a yes or no answer. And then the scribe, who would be a teacher of the law, came and asked about, or no, the Sadducees, excuse me, the Sadducees came. They who don't believe in the resurrection is what it says in the ESV. Asked this ridiculous question about 7 brothers who all married the same woman, and they each died. And whose wife is she in heaven? And Jesus says, in heaven, no one's given in marriage and no one's married. So he answered that one. And then the last one was a scribe about what's the greatest commandment. And this one is probably the only one that was sincere. I think it was sincere. And of course, Jesus says that to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your mind and with all your strength and with all your soul is the most important commandment. And if we are doing that, then we will be living in such a way that is honoring to God, generally. So those are the questions, and now Jesus takes the initiative, and he reveals their ignorance. The Pharisees and everyone who had tried to trip Jesus up were confounded by what he had to say. And in each situation, the conversation revealed the ignorance of whoever was asking the question. The Sadducees were ignorant of what the Bible said, what the Old Testament said about the resurrection. The Pharisees and the Herodians were ignorant of what they owed to God. And the Jewish leaders in the first question, that was about where do you get your authority? They were ignorant of who Jesus was. And over and over again, they revealed that they really don't understand what's going on. It's sort of like me in chemistry in college. Have I told you about my first lab? My first lab. Okay. So I was stupid, and I did not take chemistry in high school because I wanted to get the best possible GPA because I wanted to go to St. Olaf, and I knew that it was a kind of a difficult school to get into. So I chose not to take it. I didn't have to take chemistry. I know now you're jealous of me. But so I didn't. But I had to take college chemistry at a very elite school for my physical education. have no idea why. I never used it. Never used it. But after the first test, I asked for a tutor, and he said, well, let's wait. And after the second tutor, I said, yeah, let's get you a tutor. My very first lab was this thing, and I did everything just right. I put the beaker on the stand, and I put the stuff in the titrator. I don't know what it's called, but you understand what I'm saying? It drips stuff into the beaker, right? And then I was to drip and both were clear liquids. Both were clear liquids. And I was to drip the liquid, had no idea what it was, slowly in. And then something was supposed to happen. And something did happen. It turned pink. And so the first question on the sheet was, what happened? It turned pink. I'm like, I can do this. Second question, why? Because it wanted to. I had no clue about the why. I was literally ignorant in that situation. They had no clue who Jesus was. If they would have, then they would have worshipped him. But then we wouldn't be saved if they would have gotten it. Some of them did, but most of them didn't. So Jesus takes the initiative and reveals their ignorance. They were just confounded by the whole thing. You do not, and I mentioned this yesterday, that it's dangerous to argue with God. I didn't tell you the rest of that story. And I told you that's why I'm here. I can't remember the year now. It's been a long time ago, but it was in November. And God said, it's time to lay Bible study. That was not God. And it kept coming back, lay Bible study. As you know, I was writing and teaching Bible studies for 13 years. And so when I finally realized, okay, that is God. But why? This doesn't make sense. Do you see how many women are coming? I'm fulfilled doing this. And at some point in December or early January, I realized that I was coming very close to arguing with God. And I had the sermon that I remember most from my former pastor was about that and how dangerous it was. And so I walked in to my women's director, head of the women's program at our church. I said, God's telling me to lay down Bible study. And so it was in the spring, and I was teaching Mark. And what I told to the ladies was, I just taught about the disciples laying down their nets and following Jesus. And I said, God has asked me to lay down a net, and it's a net that I love. It's Bible study. And I have no idea what he's calling me to. But all I know is that he's telling me that I can't say yes to that until I say no to this. The next day I started, you guys don't know this, the next day I started 3 weeks of student teaching. I called myself the world's oldest student teacher. In order to get my full license back, which I decided I wanted to keep teaching elementary PE. So I had to get my full license back. I couldn't continue on a sub-license. And I thought, well, as long as I'm getting my license back, I'm going to have to go PE and social studies. And I had to student teach for 3 weeks. My gig with you guys was that student teaching. And then I also was in the middle school and the high school doing social studies. And while I was student teaching, I walked into the teacher workroom, and the next year's master schedule was there. And where Mrs. Hanson's name should have been, it said middle school teacher. And my first thought was, oh, Renee's retiring. The kids are going to be so sad. And my second thought was, I want that job. Because what I found out when I was student teaching was, oh, I still love teenagers. I still love being in the classroom. And I didn't have to ask. God offered it to me. Even at that point, we knew that I would end up being the high school teacher. Here's the deal. What would have happened if I would have continued? If I would have been God. Just because God says no to something doesn't mean it's bad. Now, obviously, He says don't do that, bad things. But sometimes He says don't do that. And I can't even imagine how my life would be different. I love I at times when things happen, but I love my child. Last night at Mr. Hubert's, a bunch of former students, and it was just so life-giving and so wonderful to catch up with those students. And someday you'll come back, and I'll do the same thing every time. I'll squeal it off of you. I don't care if you don't want to. I'm gonna. And it's just so much fun. So I'm glad I didn't continue to argue. So they were arguing with God, and that was not good for them. So it reveals their ignorance, and He rebukes their hypocrisy. They're claiming to love God while they are castigating and trying to trip up God's Son. They were leading people astray. And it's no wonder that Jesus' harshest criticisms were leveled at the Jewish leadership. Isn't it true that if somebody that isn't in a power position trips up and does something stupid, it probably won't have a whole lot of impact, bad impact, a negative impact, but when it's the leader, you guys don't remember Enron, it was before you were born. But Enron did this really bad thing. I can't even understand what it was, but at the highest levels, Enron went down. Now, if some little guy in the mailroom did something really stupid, that would. But these are the leaders, and so his most scathing words were for them. He called them blind guides. He called them hypocrites. He called them fools. He called them whitewashed tombs full of dead men's bones. He called them serpents, vipers, a generation of vipers. And he denounced their pride and their egotism and their laziness and and said that they were sending people to hell. They were straining out a gnat while swallowing a camel, and murdering the prophets. I mean, he just leveled them with words that were harsh. Why? Why was he so much angrier at them than he was at the average Joe? Because they were leading people. Because they were leading people away from the truth. That's part of why I take this job so seriously. Because if I teach you something that's not right, if Mr. Hubert teaches you something that's right, you might not do so well. If I teach you heresy, if I teach you something that's not correct, that's a big trouble, right? And there's a mantle on those who would dare to teach God's word, that they teach it right, and they teach it in a way that honors God. But even in these conversations, and as he walks through this week, Jesus is working to overcome that people leading people astray with his words, and he will in a very few days do so with his life. And then we're not going to talk. I'm just going to let you fill in the blanks here. This is Jerusalem now. That big dome there, that is where the temple was, the mosque. And then on the other side, well, I think this is up there. This is from the Mount of Olives. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not gonna figure that out. But he arrives in Bethany, and we've read this before, and Mary anoints him. And so the act of one who truly loves the Lord, who's that talking about? Mary. So that's Mary. And then the attitude of one who pretends to love the Lord. Judas. Because we should sell this. This is a waste of money. And the answer of Jesus, he knew Judas's heart. And his answer was that the poor you will always have with you. You won't always have me. And he's not saying don't give things to the poor. He's saying this, what she's doing is important and is exactly what she should be doing. Okay, so that's the end of the lecture. I'm going to hand out the quizzes to you. And then if you feel like to get them done, you can turn them in. You can just turn them in on the podium. And then you can get to work on your homework that Catherine told you to do. What?